Hi everyone, and welcome to this Mavin FAQ on layer editing. So I'm going to give you a comprehensive walkthrough of the layer editor. We're not going to actually go through with every function or feature that's available to you, but I do want you to know at the end of this video how to find all of the tools that you'd like to have at your disposal. So we're going to look at fire response areas. This is a simple one and complex enough to where I can show you the basics essentially and also point you in the direction of taking things to a more advanced level if you'd like. So let me take a step back here. So when you click on a layer, you're going to be brought to the layer editor portal, I guess you could call it. That is found here in the layers tab. Now, this is different from actually going to a completed project, a completed map, if you will. This has a ton of stuff over here. I can understand you might get confused, but please refer to our FAQs for questions about actual web maps. We refer to these as web maps in our FAQ section. For editing individual layers and how they're stylized and doing some other stuff in terms of data visualization with them, that's when you're going to want to use the layer editor. So to get to it, you just click on the layer itself and you're brought to this screen. Now, simple stuff that could be overlooked, changing the name, adding a description, that's all going to take place in here. Zoom, you can add the min and max zoom that the layer appears at. So this can be great. Like maybe you wouldn't want this layer to show up at this zoom. I mean, it's completely worthless with how complex it is and how far out we are. You could change that here and you could do the same in reverse. Say you had a layer that's, all of the United States highlighted. Maybe you don't need it highlighted when you're looking at one little intersection in the middle of nowhere in Colorado. So those are just some examples. You'll see the API layer ID here. And from there, you can jump into attributes. And let's actually go back to that layer. There we go. All right, so just for some context here, these are fire response areas around Boulder. So these basically are different little segments of the county that are divvied up to be responded to in the event of a fire by different departments or stations. So at least that's my understanding of it. Let's see. Yeah, we can actually click on it. Okay, so fire happens up here. Estes Park Fire is the primary fire department to respond in that area, which makes sense. Estes Park is right there. Beautiful, by the way, if you ever have the chance to go. Okay, attributes. Jumping right in here, and forgive me for my informality on this, but there's a lot here, and I don't want to get too robotic with you. You'll see that all of the information that is behind this file is found over here, and these are attributes. You can change them, whether the name, the visibility, and so forth in here if you would like. You can also add a new one. You can also delete one as well. You'll see you can also switch them from being text to decimals and integers. I'm not going to add anything to this one. This is actually a good example because it's pretty clean. But why this is important to be aware of, whether you are completely familiar with attribute tables or not at all, is that this is where not just the information in the background, but the information that your clients or team members are going to see in the pop-up, it lives, essentially. It lives in here. So you'll click, and then you see all of this information for this particular polygon now pops up. So we have this alias field somewhere in here, alias. Now it shows up here as National Park Fire because that actually is a section of Rocky Mountain National Park. So that lines up, but maybe I don't want it to say alias. I could change that category to say something else, like fire response team or something like that. But you get the idea. All right, moving on from attributes, Before I move over to our styles tab, I want to also let you know that you can actually add new features or edit existing ones up here. So if I were to click this right here, I can drag it, and I can also edit these attributes that we just talked about in here. So I could add a phone number, maybe I change the name, change the object ID, and so forth. I could add new information. You get the idea. I'm not going to save the edit because that actually is a formal boundary, but I could, if I wanted to, move it around, adjust it, and so forth. I can also go ahead and add a new line, a new polygon, or a new point. There's a bunch of stuff that I could do to just this layer. And obviously, if I then bring that into a map with other layers that I've worked on, I can very quickly add several tiers of complexity. So we'll go ahead and exit that editing section, and we'll move on to styling. Now, styling is going to differ in some cases depending on what sort of features you have. Namely, things are going to change a little bit with points, but I can cover that even though we're in this layer comprised of polygons. So first and foremost, the basics, you can change the color that the layer is filled with here. So we'll make it orange. I already have it as transparent. That you can change down here on this little transparency slider. But you could also go ahead and make it fully opaque like I just did there. Now, you can also change the stroke color and the stroke thickness. So let's go ahead and do that real quick just so you see what I'm talking about. Boom. Now they're blue and or purplish blue, and I can also up the thickness. Lastly, you can change the transparency of the stroke too. There you go. Those aren't the prettiest colors, so forgive me for that. In fact, I want to change that back to something a little easier to look at. All right. And I'll do fully black. Boom. Okay, from there you can look at all of the different labels that you'd maybe want to apply. You can change the font of the labels, and we've got quite a few in here. Feel free to mess around with those. Similarly, you can change the zoom level at which labels appear. And farther down, we have some more complex stuff. So I'm just going to briefly explain these each because we actually have FAQs for each of them. Color progressions are also known as choropleth maps, and that basically means that you can have a sliding scale of a factor or value represented with color. So this isn't the best example as a layer, but let me explain a hypothetical here for you. Let's say you have income levels, and you have on the low end, maybe you have light purple, and on the high end of income, you have dark purple. So you could use a choropleth map to show people across this layer where the low and high are, and it will break up your values so that you can see those patterns play out in color. You can also use heat maps if you have point data. Again, this is polygon information. These are polygons, but you can create heat maps with points. And if you want to learn more about that, please go to our other FAQs on that on the support.mattmaven.com URL for our support page. You also, it's worth adding in, just in case you didn't notice, that you pick the attribute that you want to base those data visualizations off of. You can also, if you have 3D data, work off of our 3D fill extrusions tool here, and I encourage you to check out the 3D fill extrusions FAQ. We have a really cool layer that we mess around with from Helsinki of 3D buildings, and that actually is available in your sample map when you first get an account, so definitely check that out. And then lastly, for this style tab, you can mess around with the legend itself. So if you're not using icons, you're going to see a circle for each layer when you bring a layer into a map and you look in the legend. You can decide what the color of the rim of the circle is and the fill is for it here. And that would make a little more sense. In fact, I can just show you these. There you go. So you can decide what the stroke is and fill. All right, back in here, one last thing I'd really like to touch on before we wrap this up is this permission little field right here. So right now we have it on disable editing. You can also switch to allow editing and to add features only. What I mean by that is you can have a layer completely uneditable in the maps that it's added to, but you could also allow people to add new features without changing the existing ones, and finally you could allow it to be entirely editable. So that's really useful for collaborative mapping projects that you might be hosting online, for example, on a public facing map. That's just one example, but in general, you can toggle the editing permissions here per layer if you'd like. That's pretty much all you need to get started. As I mentioned, we have specific FAQs for quite a few of those things, so I can't stress enough to check out our support page at support.mattmavin.com to learn more. And as always, do not hesitate to reach out to either myself directly at fletcher@apollomapping.com or to our support team at support@mattmavin.com. Thanks.